Look, the reason that we are communicating in the first place is because we're trying to connect, whether it's with our children, our spouse, our friends. That is the reason that we communicate in the first place. You're not communicating because you want to fight, you don't want to shut down, but somehow the same conversation keeps repeating. So today, you're going to understand why this is happening and how you can shift from it. To do this, we need to understand why this matters. Look, communication problems are rarely about the topic. It might start with a topic. You might feel like you're bringing a topic to your partner, to your kids, with the sole intention of you're just trying to communicate, you're trying to come to a deeper understanding. And all of a sudden, what you're really talking about is safety, identity, worth, power, and fear. It's rarely about the topic. It's about everything that's going on underneath that topic. This is the pattern that most couples live in. Now, you can take this training and you can apply it to parenting, to friendships, conversations with siblings. You can apply this to anything, but for the sake of what everybody on this call is mostly having a difficult time with, is their partner. Maybe you're dating, maybe you're married, and the same conversation keeps happening over and over and over. So the pattern that most couples are struggling with is something happens and one person brings it up. Maybe that's you, maybe it's your partner. The other person that didn't bring it up is reacting. And then it goes into blame and defensiveness. And the original issue that was trying to get resolved in the first place, it just kind of disappears. Anybody feel like the conversation takes a turn and you're like, how did we even get here? This isn't even what I wanted to talk about. Okay, that happens so often. It goes blame, defensiveness, then escalation, and the original issue disappears. Let's think about it with our kids for a hot second. You go to talk to your kids about curfew and all of a sudden they're flipping out and it becomes this big thing that you weren't even trying to talk about. And all you wanted to address was their curfew, right? Because the original issue disappears. Now let's talk about what blame sounds like, because to get out of blame, you have to first recognize that you're in blame or that they're in blame. Because not only is it really important to understand what we are going through, it's really important to understand what our other person, the person we're having that conversation with, is going through, because it will allow you to see, oh, they're trying to avoid the pain. And we're going to get there in just a minute. So this is what blame sounds like. You always, or you never, or this is your fault, or if you would just fill in the blank. Okay. Blame feels super strong in the moment. Okay. But it usually is fear disguised as control. Okay. So just sit with me for a minute. We're going to go deeper into what this looks like, but blame is usually fear disguised as control. You're trying to take back control because a part of you is feeling out of control. Now, remember, this applies to your partner too. When they're coming at you with you always or you never, just remember there's some kind of fear there that they're trying to get control over. Now, let's talk about what defensiveness looks like. Because defensiveness, it's going to feel like you're protecting, but it's also what blocks growth. So defensiveness can sound like, that's not true. I didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. And well, what about when remember, you're trying to bring up some conversation, some past situation that you're trying to be defensive about, or they are. Remember, we're talking about you because you only can control you. You can only work on you. You can only change your limiting beliefs, your belief systems, your patterns, right? We can't change or control anybody else. So the reason that I'm bringing it to your attention is to help you understand how you can do something differently, but also to bring awareness on what most likely is happening with your partner. Let's talk about the neuroscience behind it, because remember, it's just a brain, right? Like I talk about this a lot in past trainings. And if you need to go back and rewatch the laws of the brain, do it, because that's really going to help you understand what's happening inside of your brain. But last week we talked about your amygdala, and your amygdala is like your fire alarm in your brain. It's what detects your threats. Okay. So when you feel criticized, your amygdala automatically activates and your brain, it goes crazy. It's like that fire truck running down the road and you're in your car and you're driving and all of a sudden you hear those sirens and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a threat. I got to pull over, and it becomes like automatic. I imagine that your heart starts pounding a little bit more, right? It's that threat detection. So when you feel like you're being criticized, boom, that automatically is going to take over. That's automatically going to start protecting you. Your amygdala is taking place. Remember, it's just a brain and it's just programmed to do what it's supposed to. And we're going to talk in a minute about how you can reprogram what's not working for you anymore. So it's a threat. It's not a disagreement, and it's not feedback. Okay. Your brain cannot tell the difference between an emotional threat and a physical threat. Okay. A threat is a threat, and all of it means danger. An emotional threat is a critical moment, a sharp tone, feeling unheard. Those are all going to register as an emotional threat. Like you can tell, like I'm not physically in danger right now, but emotionally there's some pain there. And a physical threat is you have danger, you go into survival mode, and you go into that fight or flight, right? Like that's your brain trying to protect you. Okay, it's just a conversation, but your nervous system does not recognize that. Your nervous system responds the same way, whether it's physical or it's emotional. That's why you're going to go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now, let's explain a little bit about what those look like, because when you're threatened, your system automatically is going to shift. Fight could look like blame, right? It's like quite literally, if you're going into fight mode, you're going to go into blame mode. Flight could look like you withdraw, right? You're like, oop, I'm out. I can't do this. Freeze is going to look like you shut down. Anybody find themselves in a conversation where they just completely shut down? You stop talking, you stop really even listening. You're just kind of there, but you're not really there. And fawn is when you over explain or justify the why and the how and your actions, right? So fawn is I over explain. Put in the comments what you feel you do most. Is it fight? Is it flight? Is it freeze? Or is it fawn? How does your nervous system react automatic? Put in the chat, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I want to know. For me, I freeze. When my nervous system is activated and I feel a threat, I freeze. I shut down. I kind of stop communicating altogether. And that is how my brain will go into protection for me. So let's talk about why conversations escalate so quickly. Yeah, I see you guys in there. So fight. Okay, so some of you are fawn. Okay, great. All right, I love it. So why do conversations escalate so quickly? Your nervous system starts arguing before logic is even present. It's so automatic. You remember those ruts in the road that we were talking about last week where the tractor, it's in the field and it's rainy and it's got all that mud and there's those deep, deep ruts that those tires are stuck into. That is the exact same thing that I'm talking about with these patterns and the automatic responses that we have, because we have done it so many times that those ruts are so deep. It's just biology. You go from blame, shame, defense, and more blame, right? Anybody see those patterns in their communication? Now let's talk about what blame is really doing, because blame is just shifting discomfort outward. If this is your fault, then I'm safe, right? And that's exactly what's happening to you, by the way, with your partner. If your partner is going into blame or your children are going into blame, that's what their nervous system is saying. If this is your fault, then I'm safe. Anybody ever have kids where all they do is blame you? Well, you're strict or you're controlling or you this or you don't let me have any fun, right? It's your fault now, because if it's your fault, then they're safe. But see, the thing about blame, it protects your identity, but it destroys connection. Remember what I said in the very beginning of this? Connection is the purpose. That's why we communicate, because we're trying to connect. there would be no other reason to communicate other than trying to connect. And when you're stuck in blame, that connection, you just lit it on fire. It is now destroyed. Now, defensiveness, what it's really saying is, if I admit that I'm at fault, I might lose my worth. That's what's really going on. Remember, only 5% of your brain is your conscious awareness, and that 95% of your subconscious that is running all the patterns, all the action, everything that is so automatic is your subconscious. It takes over because it's that 95%. Right? That defensiveness, it's where you feel like you're justified and you minimize and you counter attack and you explain excessively. That's what defensiveness is really saying. And defensiveness is going to protect. You feel like you're protecting your identity, but it blocks accountability. Okay? So defensiveness is your way of protecting your identity. I want you to consider this. If blame and defensiveness they're not about the issue. When you're blaming and you get defensive, it's not about the issue. It's about what you're protecting. And that's your worth, your identity, right? And when your identity feels fragile, everything is going to feel like an attack automatically. Your amygdala is never going to chill. It is automatically going to feel like you're in that threat mode and you've got to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. If your identity is in question. Remember, this is the 95% of your brain that runs those limiting beliefs. You know what I'm talking about? That 95%, that automatic response. Now let's go into the shame layer. There is something wrong with me. That is shame. Okay. And blame avoids shame, right? Remember, if you're blaming somebody else, if you're being blamed by somebody else, that blame is avoiding that shame. Okay. That there's something wrong with me. So I'm going to go ahead and blame. Remember, 95% subconscious. You're not consciously aware that this is what's going on. You can become consciously aware of it, but chances are when it's habitual, when it's automatic, it's that 95% where you're not aware of it. And defensiveness hides shame. So blame avoids the shame and defensiveness hides the shame, but they're both pain responses. Both of those are to avoid the pain. And remember, it's that identity that's that pain that we're trying to avoid. That there's something wrong with me. Right? And same for your partner. When they go into blame or defensiveness, they're trying to avoid that pain of that belief that maybe there's something wrong with them. So they blame you and they get defensive to you. It's the same thing happening on both sides. It's just human behavior. Now, you learned how to survive conflict long before your marriage, long before you had kids. This is something that happened that you learned when you were a child. Your brain kept the same strategy because it worked back then. Something that you took as a belief or a coping skill or a pattern, something that you learned as a child and it worked then, to your brain, it's like, oh, that worked. It kept me really safe. It protected me. So then we keep those same patterns into adulthood. But the struggle with that is they're no longer working because what you're needing and what you're wanting as an adult is very different than what you needed and what you wanted as a child, right? So this pattern, it's just a pattern, you guys. It's just the pattern that's keeping your brain safe. Remember, your brain, it's thinking it's keeping you safe because it's not understanding the difference between physical and emotional danger, right? But this isn't your personality. This isn't part of your identity. This is quite literally a coping skill that you developed to keep you safe, to counteract a limiting belief. And we're going to go into that more in just a minute. So let's talk about what happens. You have a thought, then you have the emotion, then you have a reaction, then you have a result. Okay, so if the thought is, he doesn't respect me, the emotion is going to be something along the lines of hurt or anger. And then you're going to go into blame. That's going to be the reaction. Okay. Now, if the thought is, she thinks I'm failing, that emotion is shame. Remember, that's more of an identity. And he's going to most likely go into defensiveness. If you can expose the thought, you can change the reaction on both parties, both sides, with your children, with your partner. If the belief, you got to identify that belief beneath the blame. And it could be something like, if I'm not right, I'm unsafe. Another one could be, if this is my fault, I lose power. Control is always going to feel safer than being vulnerable. But remember, you can't have real connection without being vulnerable. Identify that belief beneath the blame. Now, remember, your brain has to find the answers. You ask it the question, it finds the answer. Sometimes it might take a minute. Sometimes it might be automatic. Depending on the level of pain attached to the belief is going to be about how long it's going to take for your brain to recognize what's really happening beneath that blame. But if you ask it the question, it will give you the answer to what that limiting belief is beneath the blame. Now, let's talk about the belief that could be beneath defensiveness. Could be, if I admit I'm wrong, I lose value. Could be, mistakes mean that I'm unworthy. See, accountability is often going to feel like devastation in these moments of recognizing that belief beneath the defensiveness. I want to share with you some core limiting beliefs, and I want you to just think if any of these resonate. If you've ever felt this way about yourself, I just want you to think about it for a second. Some core limiting beliefs could be, love is conditional. Now, that could look like, if I do this, then I'm loved, or if I say the right thing, I feel loved, or if I serve, I feel loved, right? Love is conditional. That's a core limiting belief. Another one is, I must perform to be accepted. I have to do all the things that are expected of me to feel accepted. Often we feel this with our children, especially as moms, where it's like we run ourselves ragged and into the ground because we feel like if we perform for them, if we make the dinner, clean the house, run the errands, get the things they want, if we do that imaginative checklist. We talked about that last week, the scorekeeping, the silent scorekeeping. If we check all the boxes for our kids, then they'll accept us, they'll love us, they'll value us, they'll think we're doing a good job. We'll get that like gold star for our momming of the day, right? A core limiting belief. I must perform to be accepted. This also could apply to your partner too, making sure that you check all those emotional boxes, those physical boxes, because then that would mean that you're accepted. Another one is, if I'm wrong, I'll be rejected. A lot of times this shows up in, if I'm wrong, I'm not smart. That could be another way of recognizing that limiting belief. If I'm wrong, that means I'm not smart, or they won't think I'm smart. Another one is, my needs don't matter unless I fight. Like, if I don't go to battle for my needs, if I don't get in arguments, if you're one that you find yourself always like picking a fight, chances are you've got that core limiting belief that your needs don't matter unless you fight. Okay. And let me go a little bit deeper into that. And the reason that would happen is because you're looking for your partner or your kids or whoever it is that you're fighting with, you're looking for them to prove to you that you do matter by fighting back. Okay. Remember, core subconscious belief. Another one could be, conflict means that I'm not loved. This one goes off a lot in women. If your partner or your spouse or whoever, your kids come to you and they bring you conflict, then you immediately will shut down, and because that to your brain means that you're not loved. Now, this is just a limiting belief. I want to kind of stop for a second and explain to those of you, because I know there's some new ones here today on this training. I want to explain to you where a limiting belief really comes from. Now, for a lot of you that are on this call and watching this training, you know I'm a faith-based life coach. And with that, I talk a lot about the adversary, because I really think it's so important to understand who he is, what his purpose is, and how he works, because there is quite literally a war in your thoughts. And a lot of the thoughts that come in your brain, they aren't yours. And those limiting beliefs, they come from the adversary. Call him whatever you want. Lucifer, Satan, the enemy, whatever you want to call him whatever you want. But that's where those beliefs come from, because at some point in time, he influenced your thought by whispering a nasty little lie. And because you didn't know any better, remember, this isn't your fault, but because you didn't know any better, you believed it. And the second that you believed it, you took it on as truth. And now, because you've listened to that over and over and over and over again, it's become part of who you think you are. Whether it's I'm not smart, or I'm not worthy, or nothing I do is ever good enough, or I'm not lovable, or I don't deserve good, or whatever it is, whatever nasty, yucky, icky lie he's convinced you of, that is where the limiting beliefs come from. If it feels dark and heavy, it comes from darkness every single time. There's no exceptions. If it feels dark and heavy, it's always based in a lie. And those lies always come from the enemy. Always. If it feels good, we don't ever question the good ones. We don't ever question if we're feeling happy and joyful. We don't question the why, like, well, why am I feeling happy? We don't do that because it feels really, really good. And so when it feels good, it comes from God. It comes from your Heavenly Father. It comes from light. It comes from truth. And so, but we don't question those because we like the way we feel. We're chasing that feeling. But to get more of a good thing, you got to get rid of the bad. And to get rid of the bad, you've got to recognize where it comes from. So I want to share that with you because these core limiting beliefs that I'm asking you to recognize, you've got to recognize where they come from. And they don't come from you. They never will come from you because you are created in God's image and you are created from light, and light is more powerful than darkness. Anyways, tangent, but I wanted you to understand where that comes from. So why fragile identity creates conflict. Now, remember that fragile identity is because you're believing the lie. And most likely it's because you don't even really know that the lie is there. You don't know where it's coming from. You haven't identified that yet. And that's what these trainings are for, is to help you identify that. So why fragile identity creates conflict? When your worth feels unstable, every disagreement is going to feel overwhelming. That could be disagreements with your children, with your partner. That could be a disagreement when you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, or somebody looks at you funny, or somebody has a weird tone, or a friend says something you don't like, and it feels overwhelming. It's because your identity is in a fragile state. You're not arguing about dishes. You're not arguing about the trash. You're not arguing about the curfew. You're arguing about identity. That's what you're arguing about. So under the blame, the hidden fear could be, I'm afraid I don't matter. That could be what that. Now remember, these triggers, these limiting beliefs, these triggers, they're like the easy button, like the Staples easy button. You all know what I'm talking about. You've seen the commercial where it's like somebody does something, like they push the easy button and it's like, oh, that was easy, right? Like imagine that you have those all over your body, and some are really, really big and some are tiny. Those are those triggers that I'm talking about, where when something happens and that trigger is pushed, I want you to envision just like somebody pushing one of those easy buttons on you, like, boop, that was easy. It's because that limiting belief is getting pushed and it's painful and it's yucky and now it's a trigger. And so when someone does something, then you react. And under blame, the reaction is to, I'm afraid I don't matter. Now, this could be another limiting belief, but this is just an example. So I need you to think about what that could be for you. The blame is, I'm afraid I don't matter. And under defensiveness, I'm afraid I'm not enough. So we get defensive to try to prove that we are enough. Most conflict is unspoken fear. Now, I want you to think about your unspoken fear, because remember, we can't control anybody else. We can't jump inside someone else's brain and understand what's really going on in there, but we can for ourselves. And so if you can think of, oh, I was just really afraid that I don't matter. Let's go back to the curfew. Okay. You're talking to your kids about curfew and you're trying to explain to them why a curfew is important, and they're not hearing it because their adolescent brain, they really just don't They don't care about a curfew because they want what they want, right? They want to be with their friends. They want to feel powerful. They want to feel like they matter. And to you, you could probably be feeling like you don't matter. Well, if I mattered, then they would come home because they'd recognize that I want sleep too. And I want them to feel safe. And I want to feel like I'm a good mom because I'm caring about my kids, right? I'm just throwing some things out there. I've had these conversations with my teenagers, and that's exactly what I felt. Well, I don't matter to them, because if I mattered to them, then they would come home because they would see that I'm exhausted, and me being up until 2 o'clock in the morning is just not working, right? Like, that's just an example. But that underlying thing was being afraid that I don't matter to them. And under defensiveness is being afraid that I'm not enough. Okay, so I invite you to think about what it is that your fear is as to why you go to blame and you go to defensiveness. The truth about power, blame feels powerful. I want you to think about a time when you blamed someone for something. Okay, maybe it was a sibling. Maybe it was a spouse, your partner, your children. Think about a time where you were in blame, where you were blaming them. It feels powerful, right? It's like, well, I didn't do this, you did this. And that feels powerful. And defensiveness feels protective. When we go to defend ourselves, we're protecting ourselves. True power is emotional regulation. I want you to say that out loud wherever you are. True power is emotional regulation. Power is staying grounded when your nervous system wants to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. True power is staying grounded. Remember, the purpose is to connect, to build connection. Change is possible because blame is something that we learned. We learned how to blame someone. And defensiveness was also learned. We learned how to be defensive. But anything that you learned can be retrained. If you're at a place in your life where you're sick and tired of feeling the way that these things feel, it can be retrained. Everything can. Because remember, this was learned when you were a child. You learned it to keep you safe. I see in the chats, yes, dealing with resentment towards my husband at the moment, and that I told you so and I didn't listen to me, and now look. Yeah. So I invite you to look at what's happening underneath. What is being protected in that moment? So I want to give you guys some tools, right? The whole purpose of this training is to recognize what's happening, to understand it a little bit better, and then get some tools to help you shift if that's where you're at in your life, where you want to make a shift. Tool number 1 is I want you to regulate first. When you pause before you react and you breathe a little bit slower, because when you breathe a little bit slower, it's actually going to lower your cortisol levels. Okay. Because when that threat is detected, your protection mode is your cortisol levels, they raise. Okay. So when you breathe slowly, it will actually lower those for you. And then I want you to lower your tone. Even if it's a tone so low that you feel uncomfortable lowering it that low, I want you to lower your tone like this, because what that does to your brain is it signals that you're safe to yourself. It's going to help shut off that amygdala, that threat detection. It's going to prove to yourself, okay, I'm safe. Lowering your tone. And I want you to kind of play with this a little bit, because I want you to recognize when you raise your tone, when you escalate that, when you vibrate higher, that frequency, I want you to recognize what's happening inside of you. You're going to feel it automatically. Okay. Chances are your heart's going to start pumping. You're going to feel more tense. You're going to feel it throughout your entire body. So I want you to kind of play with this. Like when you're not in a situation of blame and defensive, just start playing with it so that you can really start to recognize what's happening inside of your body. Lower your tone is going to signal to yourself that you're safe. And then I want you to relax your shoulders, like consciously awareness relaxation. Like you're almost trying to like shove your shoulders into the ground, like just like relax them. Because when you relax your shoulders, it actually releases that physical tension everywhere in your body. Okay. So first comes regulation. and then communication comes second. So before you do anything, pause, breathe slowly, lower your tone, and relax your shoulders. Now, this is going to take conscious effort because your automatic response is going to be the opposite of this. Because remember, your body's going to be thrown into protection because it's detecting a threat. Okay. So you have to consciously regulate. Okay. Now, you can take a screenshot of this. You can write it down. Hopefully, you're taking notes, but you'll also have the ability to come back and rewatch this training later. Okay. Then I want you to name the real emotion. Anger is always a second emotion. Always. It's to cover up the real emotion that's happening. It's also another way for your brain to protect you. So I want you to ask yourself, am I hurt? Am I scared? Do I feel unseen? You've got to name the real emotion before you speak. Because when you can name what's really happening, your entire experience of that conversation is going to shift. Everything will shift. So name what's really happening. Oh, I feel really hurt right now. Oh, I'm really scared right now. I don't feel like they see me. I don't feel like they're hearing me, right? Like name it. Name what's really going on. And then the third tool is I want you to use ownership language. This is something we're going to practice here in a minute. So instead of saying, well, you never listen, I want you to say something like, I felt unheard in that moment. That is very different. And in doing that, whether you're talking to your kids or your spouse or your partner, whoever you're talking to, you're actually going to like open up their brain to not be defensive or in blame themselves. It is like a miracle that happens when you rephrase this instead of like, gosh, you never listened to me. It's like, hey, babe, I felt unheard in that moment. I promise you will feel the difference when you communicate with ownership language. Instead of it's their fault, I felt unheard. Okay. And that ownership is what's going to lower that threat response. Then I want you to separate behavior from identity. Instead of saying you're selfish, right? You're selfish. I want you to say, gosh, when that happened, I really felt unsupported. You see that shift in that ownership language? And yes, 100%, this is going to be harder in the moment when you're feeling triggered, when your threat detection is going off. It's going to be harder, but that's what practicing does. Because when you practice something over and over and over again, it becomes a new pattern. It becomes a new automatic response. Okay? And if I see in the chat right now, my husband always deflects. Okay, remember, blame is protection. That's what your husband is doing. He's protecting himself from feeling all the feels that come from what he's trying to avoid. Okay. Now, I don't tell you this to use it against him. I tell you this to help you see what's happening, because every single time that we have one of these limiting beliefs that is so painful that we're really trying to avoid, right? Your brain's just trying to avoid it. Remember the 3 laws of the brain: seek pleasure, avoid pain, conserve energy. Your husband is just trying to avoid that pain. And that pain was most likely taken on in childhood. That's why we often will say, I say this a lot, at least I used to say this a lot, that I'll say like, gosh, you're acting like a child. Anybody ever feel that? Like when your spouse is like flipping out, or your boyfriend or your partner or whoever, and you're like, gosh, you're acting like such a child. We don't say it to our kids because they are children, but we say it to our spouse. It's because quite literally their brain goes back to when they learned that behavior, when that trigger was adopted, and their brain goes back to that state. So they are quite literally acting like children. Again, please, please, please don't use this against your partner. Use this as more of a way to have some awareness of what's going on, because that pain that they're feeling is quite literal, just like it is for you. That limiting belief is so painful. Okay, so try to use this information as awareness to understand the why. Now, I don't say this as like a, hey, honey, it's okay. You're going back to a child state and the way that you're behaving is acceptable because of it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm inviting you to understand the why, because then when you can understand what's really going on with them, you can have a little bit of compassion, and these conversations won't lead to blow-ups. Okay? So they are quite literally going back to a child state, and so are you. And that's just the hard truth, because whatever age you were when you believed this limiting belief that your brain is trying to bury and hide because it's so painful, you also go back to that state. It's just how it works. It's not just for men, it's for women too. So I want you to separate the behavior from the identity. Instead of saying you're selfish, say things like, hey, when that happened, I really felt unsupported. That's ownership behavior. That's ownership communication. That's not saying what you just did is okay. That's saying, hey, when that happened, this is how I felt. When you behaved that way, this is how I felt. But I want you to say it in the phrase of what happened. Hey, when that door was slammed, when you slammed that door, I really felt unsafe. Okay? Identify the behavior, but separate it from identity. See, I was actually talking with one of my clients this week, and she was talking about how she can't trust, or she doesn't want to trust, or she doesn't trust. And she was talking about how she said, I don't trust this person. And I said, all the time? She's like, well, no, sometimes I do. I said, okay, because I don't trust you. That's an identity statement. That's you as a whole, right? I don't trust in this situation is situational, right? So be very aware of identity. In the comments, I'm tired of being supportive and compassionate. Okay, I want you to go back and watch the boundary training that I did, because there seems to be a boundary issue. Because if you're always feeling like you're just being supportive and you're being compassionate, then somewhere along the way, like, the boundaries aren't being withheld, right? Now the boundaries are, if this is what's happening, then I'll behave this way, right? That's very different than ultimatums and control. That's protecting you and showing up in truth for you. Okay. And I can send you that link too. So I want you to be very aware and critique the behavior, not the identity. And tool number 5, I want you to replace the defense with curiosity. Okay. Instead of saying, well, that's not true, right? That's being defensive. Well, that's not true. I want you to say, hey, can you help me understand what felt hurtful? Right? Can you help me understand what felt hurtful? I promise you, what this does is it opens up the door for real communication. And I want you to just ask yourself, okay, if somebody came at me and was like, well, that's not true, how do you react? Excuse me. How do you react? How do you feel? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? You go into the defense. You go to protect yourself, right? But what if they came at you and said, hey, can you help me understand what felt hurtful? What are you going to do? You're going to probably try and help them understand what felt hurtful in a calm way. Well, hey, like, this is why it felt so hurtful. Curiosity always creates safety. Always. And you can practice this with your kids. Hey, I recognize you just whacked your brother. You just hit your brother. Hey, can you help me understand, like, why you felt like you needed to hit him? Can you help me understand what was happening? They'll tell you. Kids are so honest that way. You go and confront a 3-year-old, like, hey, help me understand what's going on. They'll tell you. Okay. We learn as adults that being vulnerable is scary. And what I'm inviting you to do is to lower that wall, be vulnerable, because what you want is connection. And the only way to get it is to be vulnerable. Then I want you to stabilize your identity. This is so important, because remember, your identity is what you feel is being questioned. So I want you to stabilize it. I want you to remind yourself, look, I can be wrong and still be worthy. I can be wrong and still be smart. I can be wrong and still have value, right? I can be wrong and still be loved. A mistake does not equal rejection. Good heavens, we are here to make mistakes, to learn and to grow. But remember, the adversary has convinced us that a mistake means that you're going to be rejected. Don't acknowledge that you made a mistake because then they won't like you, right? Those nasty little thoughts that come in your brain. A mistake equals, I want you to remind yourself, stabilize that identity. I want you to battle the adversary, for lack of better words. Like, challenge him. He's the one who wants you to be miserable. He's the one that wants you to stay stuck in blame. He's the one that is putting all these nasty thoughts in your brain. Challenge him. A mistake does not equal rejection, and feedback does not erase your value. Okay? Challenge your identity. And then I want you to slow the narrative. I want you to ask yourself, okay, what story am I telling right now? What am I hearing? Am I hearing that I'm not loved? Am I hearing that I'm not good enough? Am I hearing that I don't matter? Remember, you ask your brain, it's going to tell you the answer, whether you like it or not, whether it's really painful or it's light and fluffy, you're going to find the answer. So what story am I telling? What's the narrative that I'm hearing right now? And is it true? Now, remember, if it feels dark and heavy, it comes from darkness. That means it's always based in a lie. And it goes a little bit deeper too. When you ask yourself, is it true? And you're like, well, no, you're allowed to continue to believe it if you want to. You're allowed to continue to ride that wave of that emotion if you want to. You have agency. You're also allowed to change it if you want to. Then I want you to ask yourself, is it fear? Is fear showing up? Because these stories is what fuels that reaction. Remember, the thought, the story, right? The thought creates the emotion. The emotion is what ignites that action, right? We talked about this, about going to the gym. If you have a thought like, oh, I really want to get in shape, and the energy, the emotion is, ooh, I feel empowered. I feel like I can make this happen. This is going to work. I bet you're going to wind up at the gym. Chances are you're going to feel empowered. And then the results are going to start to be that you gain muscle. Now, the same goes for the flip side. If the thought is, I really want to get in shape, but I don't feel like it's ever going to happen, I bet you're not going to end up at the gym. You're going to end up watching a show on the couch, right? Those stories, they are what fuel the reactions. The reactions is what gives you the result, right? You're never going to be able to go to the gym and lift weights and never get stronger. You're going to get stronger. It's scientifically proven. You're going to get stronger. And on the same side, you're never going to be able to sit on the couch and get stronger as if you were in the gym. It doesn't work that way. So what you want, make sure that the story, that the emotion that is fueling that reaction is what you want. It's the result that you want to have. And I need you to drop the need to win. The goal is not dominance. The goal is understanding. The goal is connection. The goal is love, right? That's the goal. We all want to feel loved. We all want to feel accepted. We all want to feel connected. The goal is not to dominate in conversations. The goal is to have a deeper understanding of why they feel the way that they feel, what is happening with them, why you feel the way that you feel, and what is happening with you. The goal is understanding, not to win. I don't know anybody that leaves a conversation that ended in argument and heated and pain and harsh words. I don't know anybody that leaves that's like, I just won that one. I feel great. I just won. I don't know anybody that feels that way. What they feel is all the negative garbage that comes with the battle, and more stacked pain, and more stacked resentment, and anger, and all the nasty feelings that the adversary wants you to feel. No one leaves an argument excited that they won when they're giving up so much. The cost is your connection. Okay? Winning arguments and losing intimacy is not success. It's not success. And that's not what you're here for. You're not here to just win. You're here to build a more deep, meaningful relationship, more deep, meaningful connection. So I need you to drop the need to win. It's okay, because guess what? When you drop that need to win, you actually get something greater: compassion, love, connection, understanding. Those are the real prizes. So what changes when you stop blaming? Conversations will soften. They will soften. And safety will increase when you step out of blame. And escalation will decrease. And the repair will become faster. When you can get blame out of the way, and keep in mind, you can do this on the receiving end by saying things like, I hear you're really frustrated. I hear that you're hurt, right? When you can understand what's happening and you have that compassion and you can just express it. Hey, I hear that you're really, really hurt right now. I hear that you're really frustrated. That escalation is going to decrease, right? It might take them a minute for their brain to be like, oh, wait, what did she just say? Did she just say that she hears that I'm hurt? Right? Like it might take them a second to like click into like, wait, what's happening here? Right? Because they're in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? Ownership is what builds intimacy. Now, I want to make something very clear. I am not suggesting that you take ownership of someone else's behavior. That is not what I'm talking about. I am not suggesting that you take responsibility for what is not yours to take responsibility about. Taking responsibility for you, not them, not them. This does not look like going and apologizing for other people's behavior. That's not what I'm talking about. This is about your ownership of you. Okay, I really needed to hit that home because I don't want you guys to go and take on all the ownership of everybody else's emotions. They're not yours. They're not yours to take ownership over. Let them have them. My invitation is for you to understand what's going on with them and you, take ownership of what you have and let them keep what they have. You can't fix them. As much as sometimes I wish that were not the case, but you can't. You can't change anybody unless they want to change themselves. You can influence. That's about the only thing you've got for them is to influence them. So what changes when you stop defending? Growth becomes possible. Shame actually loses its power and trust increases. Humility is what strengthens relationships. I want you to have a little bit of self-reflection right now. I just want you to take a minute and I want you to ask yourself, where do I default to blame? And where do I default to defensiveness? And the bigger, deeper question, what am I protecting? I just want you to take a moment and think about that for a minute. Where do I default to blame? Where do I default to defensiveness? And what am I protecting? Recognizing is the first step. If you can recognize what's happening, you can get rid of what's not working for you and you can replace it with what you want. But the first step is to recognize. So I want you to practice this, okay? I want you to write these questions down. I want you to take one current tension, pick something that's happening in your life right now, something that's real, because it's real, it's fresh. Your brain is really going to be aware of it. So pick one current tension, and I want you to rewrite your usual response. I want you to rewrite it into ownership language. Just rewrite it. And then I want you to practice it mentally, because remember, what you practice is what will actually happen in the moment. Like you think of like all these professional athletes and how they're practicing constantly. They're not just practicing physically, they're practicing mentally and emotionally, right? Because when that thing happens on the field, on the court, they want their body to automatically respond the way that they want, right? When you practice something mentally, you can see it, you can feel it, you rehearse it. Then that's what happens when the moment arises. You respond the way that you practice, the way that you wanted to respond. That ownership language is what takes over and it becomes what's automatic. But it will not happen if you can't see it, if you can't feel it, and if you don't rehearse it. You will not react a different way. You will react on pattern. You got to practice it. This takes courage. I want you to understand that. It takes courage to say, I felt hurt. It takes courage to say, I was wrong. It takes courage to say, I really want to understand. That is strength. That is taking your power back. It takes courage to do those things. You have to want to be courageous. You have to want to get the thing that comes with being courageous. And I can promise you, the first time that you think to say this, especially in a heated argument, when you haven't rehearsed it first, your body is going to fight it like you might die if those words come out of your mouth. You got to practice. You got to rehearse if this is something that you want. Communication is creation. Every conversation that you have plants seeds. Blame plants distance. Defensiveness plants walls. And regulation plants safety. You're always planting something. You're always sowing something. Be mindful of what you're planting. Is it what you want? Do you want more walls around you? Do you want higher walls around you? Do you want to keep stacking those bricks to your wall? Do you want distance between you and the people that you're trying to connect with? Is that what you want? You're the only one that will know. You're always planting something. Be mindful of what you're planting. So I want to give you this 7-day practice for 1 week, just 1 week. Next week, I'm going to ask you how it went. Just 1 week, I want you to pause before you respond. And I want you to practice this even in the situations where they feel really good because you're training your brain, right? So I want you to pause before you respond. I want you to give your nervous system time to regulate, okay? If you practice these in happy moments, it will become more automatic in those moments when your amygdala is detecting a threat. Practice pausing before you respond. Make that your new go-to, that you always pause. Now, it doesn't have to be like a 30-minute pause. I'm just talking like a 5-second, like just pause. Give yourself time to take a deep breath. Just maybe not so dramatic, but you know what I mean? Just like give yourself time to respond. And then I want you to replace one blaming statement. I want you to use ownership language instead, just for 1 week. And I see you, Dr. Williams. I don't want you to go into pausing for so long that you go into that freeze, that shutdown. Just long enough for your brain and your body to relax before you respond, to recognize what's happening. That's why I want you to practice this when things are happy, right? Getting yourself into that rhythm. Replace one blaming statement, use ownership language instead. And then I want you to replace one defensive reaction with curiosity. Just one. Small repetitions is how you create a new neural pathway so that the way that you want to show up, the way you want to feel now becomes your automatic. But it starts with the small repetitions. So take a screenshot, come back and watch the recording, write it down, pause before you respond, replace one blaming statement with ownership language and replace one defensive reaction with curiosity. Just once and see how it works. I want you to test this. I want you to see how it works for you, how you can adopt this into your life. You do not communicate to win. You're communicating to connect. Connection begins when you feel safe enough to stop protecting and start relating. That is when you connect. I want to thank you guys all for coming. I know that these sometimes are hard to get on. I just want to thank you for all showing up for you and for the ones that you love, because that's why you're doing this. Because if it was just about you, you'd be like, I'm fine. But something in your life is not working anymore. Something in you is ready for change. Something in you is ready to start feeling powerful again, real power, taking your power back. So I want to thank you and recognize that you're here. And I'm really proud of you for being here. And I want to invite you to the clarity call tomorrow, where we can actually dive into what's happening and I can help you frame that ownership language. It's tomorrow, same time. So thanks for all coming. I'm going to post this replay. It will be available later on this afternoon so that you can watch it. It will be there until next week's training goes live. And I do want to let you know that there will be no training the week of the 16th. That's spring break. And I figured y'all are going to be with your family anyway. So the week of the 16th, we'll be taking a week off of the free trainings and then we'll be picking right back up. So next week, we're still on. If there is a topic that you would like to know more about or you would like me to dive in similar to this one, go in the community and put your request in. You can also text me privately. Just respond to the text that you get reminding you about these trainings if there's something that you really want more information about. So I'll send out the link later for this training to be rewatched. Please let me know how your action item is going, how you're doing this week with taking a break, recognizing what's happening. I want to know how it's working for you. Practice it on your kids. Practice it on a friend. Practice it any chance you get. Remember, it's just to stop really quick. Take a deep breath before you go into what's happening. Okay? Thanks again for being here, and I will see you all next week.